あの壁は50メートルだぞ。やつだ。巨人だ。
Yeah, if you couldn't guess, we're taking a look here at Titans from World of Warcraft, the kind of ultimate beings in the story of WoW. And specifically, these are Titan hero cards made by all of you out there. And the first one is Aggramar the Avenger from Hero Wix, a 10 mana mage hero card with the battlecry summon Grond the Living Mountain. And that's, of course, a great, cool lore reference to Aggramar and making Grond and all of the stuff happening on Draenor. And Grond is this just ginormous elemental, a 10 mana 7/7 with Taunt, Rush, Lifesteal, and Wind Fury. And at first I was like, oh my god, that's too much stuff for one card. But then I thought, it's actually not that much better than like Walking Fountain, and that's a normal 8-drop. So yeah, I think Grond at 10 mana here feels just fine. And then the hero powers here for Aggramar basically are different elemental variations that play off of also the 4 effects that Grond has. So this card connects itself together really nicely from a lore standpoint, from a character standpoint, and just from a flavor and feel standpoint. The 4 hero powers are Earth Might, give a friendly minion +4 health and taunt. Fire Rage, give a friendly minion +3 attack and rush. Water Blessing, give a friendly minion +2/+2 and lifesteal. And Wind Fury, with a space, not to be confused with Wind Fury, which gives a friendly minion +1/+1 and Wind Fury. So basically different variations of buffs and some kind of effect that you also see on Grond, which feels really cool. So all in all, as a bundle, like this card does so many things really, really well. Great characters, love the artwork choices. The only thing that's blowing my mind is I just feel like it should be a shaman card. I don't think there's any reason Aggramar specifically is a mage. He's kind of more of a warrior-looking character, if anything, in my mind. So I don't know that mage was a great fit. So shaman to me really feels like master of the elements. It would be just perfect fit for this one. So Heroics and I disagree there. I think this should be a shaman card, but beyond that, it's just really cool, right? You got this big giant bomb minion, which I love. You drop that on 10, it helps you stabilize the game because it's got all these defensive aspects. You clear the board, you heal a ton. You've even maybe got a taunt left over. And then you've got these hero powers, which give you a lot of upside over the course of the game, swapping between them each turn. Now, they do require minions. These aren't things that are just generally good, so you have to have a deck that's able to reinforce that with lots of either minion generation or just minions in your deck that you draw through, which, you know, places a bit of a limitation here, but then there's a lot of upside on these, and they can even start stacking as well if minions survive across turns, right? You can buff attacks and give lifesteal and all these different things over time, so you could really start investing in a giant minion, including Grond if it somehow lives over multiple turns. So all in all, a lot of this card is absolutely perfectly executed. I just really wish for me personally that it was a shaman. Could be almost anything, but I'm curious what you guys out there think. So moving on here to Norgannon, the Keeper of Secrets, another mage hero card, this time with 5 mana from Sejaster. And this battlecry reads, for the rest of the game, you see spells in your opponent's hand, and the hero power is all secrets known. 1 mana, discover a secret from any class. So Norgannon's all about magic and kind of the keeper of magic and lore, and in this case, the Keeper of Secrets, because apparently he knows so much about magic, he can see your opponent's magic in hand, which I think is this really cool effect. I've always liked reconnaissance, informational advantage style cards, where you get to see what your opponent's doing. Those are the kinds of effects in Hearthstone that don't make themselves visibly powerful, but often do have a pretty big impact over how you play a game and can really help you create a lot of problems in how your opponent's able to use their stuff, like never play into that flame strike they're so clearly holding. And then you've got this hero power here, which allows you to generate lots of value over time with all kinds of secret generation. Now, this is very much a hero card that's low tempo. You're doing almost nothing the turn you play this. And even in the future, right, like spending, 2 to 4 mana for a secret play isn't the most exciting thing in the world. It's just a lot of value, but still requires a pretty big commitment of mana each and every turn. But if you build your deck in a way to, utilize secret synergies, if you've got plays that you want to shut down from your opponent or counters to certain kinds of spells, then, Norgannon could offer a lot of upside. So I think this card's really, really cool. I don't know exactly why you'd run this over other hero cards that exist, but not every card has to be incredibly powerful necessarily. This still does something unique, fun, different, and seems very befitting for the character in my mind. All right, so next up here we have Sargeras, the Dark Titan from Synth and Lasers, a 6 mana, 6 armor hero card for Demon Hunter with a battle cry that gives your hero +6 attack this turn. I don't think the numbers there were a coincidence. And the hero power is pretty crazy on this one. It's called This Is the End. It's 1 mana, and it reads your hero power costs 1 more every time you hit it. And then if it costs 10, you destroy the enemy hero. So this is basically an alternate win condition like we saw in the past with the Uther Death Knight or Mechathune. Now, I will say I think it's a win condition that's really, really hard to achieve as currently constructed, because basically at the end there, you're spending like 7 mana on just your hero power, and then 8 mana on just your hero power, 9 mana on just your hero power, which is really big commitments. You're basically not doing almost anything else with your turrets for like 4 or 5 turns there at the end of the game. I'm not sure many decks, particularly Demon Hunter as it's constructed today, but even theoretically in the future, I don't know how many decks could really sustain the last 4 or 5 turns of this hero power and stay in the game. I mean, you know, maybe at 5 mana with a Chaos Nova, things would be okay, but then it starts getting incrementally much, much harder. So I don't know exactly what meta or, you know, counter this would exist to, but I love the idea of these hero powers that are this sense of impending doom or effects in general, like we saw with Ren the First Disciple, where you've got a long time to react to it, but you can see it coming and you know, like, oh my God, he's going to end the game. He's going to end the game. How do I present a scenario where I win if he spends 8 mana on this hero power? I can't play into like Immolation Aura, for instance, these sorts of things. At the 9 mana situation, I can't leave an I-Beam out there that's good. So all kinds of scenarios where you have to line up the math as the opponent. That's really cool. Now, again, I don't think this would be very good as it stands. I do wish like this hero power had some kind of minion summon bundled with it, or maybe a discount to cards in your hand every time you hit it. Something that helps you ease it out a little, because right now it just seems incredibly unfeasible to me to ever pull this off. But maybe that's okay for these like universal win condition cards. Maybe they have to be pretty tough. And there's always other mechanisms in Hearthstone that can help you cheat things like this out too. So all in all, still a really cool flavor and feel for this one. Just some struggling perhaps on the execution. All right, up next here we have Golganath the Thunderer from Cynical Wind, a 10 mana hero card for Shaman. Battlecry for each giant that died this game. Summon an 8/8 sea giant with Taunt. I love this giant synergy stuff is really cool. The hero power is Giant Thunderclap. Every time a giant dies, cast Lightning Bolt on a random enemy. So this is really befitting of what Golganath's all about. We got some storm stuff. We got some sea giants in there. And I think this is a really cool idea. A deck that's structured specifically around giants. Now, you know, I guess in the past eras of Hearthstone, we had more giants in standard format. A lot of them have rotated at this stage. So maybe Golganath's a little bit past his time here. But I thought giants as this sort of unspoken type or mechanic was really cool. They're kind of always 8/8s that have some way to discount them. That's fun. And Shaman has even had access to some class-specific ones as well. So it seems like a great class certainly for that. But how do you get all these different giants into play? You know, how do you play Molten Giants and Mountain Giants and Sea Giants, some of which aren't even in standard anymore, but let's pretend. And then, you know, if you haven't already won the game via these giant cheat mechanisms, Golganath basically gives you this enormous board build, presumably summoning, you know, 4 to 7 giants that are all big 8/8s with Taunt, and that's amazing. And then your opponent clears those giants, and your passive hero power suddenly starts smacking them in the face, probably with lightning bolts, which is really cool. So you get this one ultimate swing turn, and then any other time you play giants, you get a little bit of upside on this hero power, but ultimately the hero power probably has pretty quick diminishing returns, because if you didn't win the game with Golganath, it's going to be harder and harder to play more giants, get those to kill, and get those to die, and then even if they do die, is 3 damage really enough? So you're basically setting up this, you know, increasingly powerful situation and then slamming Golganath as the win condition and hoping that it's enough to get there. And I think certainly often in many cases it would indeed be. But I just love the idea of a giant synergy deck. It's, you know, something we haven't seen before. We've seen other synergy decks that giants fit well into, you know, things like Handlock, Mountain Giants, but never a deck that was about exploiting giants itself, which is such a cool idea and mechanic for me that Golganath would be the perfect way to bring that to life. All right, so next up is another Norgannon here from Arahan, an 8 mana mage hero card. It's got 5 armor and battlecry Destroy your side of the battlefield. So you're sacrificing all your theoretical minions here for Norgannon. But if you do, you get this 2-mana hero power, Contemplate, which will give your hero spell damage +1, which will then scale over the course of the game and track. So every time you hit this, you gain an additional spell damage, moving up to 2, 3, 5, 15 eventually if the game goes on that long somehow. So really big counter-tempo play with Norgannon. If you are ahead on board, you wipe your stuff to gain the advantages of this hero power long term. More likely, you're probably going to be playing from behind and won't have any minions on board, but even then, you're sacrificing 8 mana to basically do nothing, which is really hard to do in a defensive deck. 5 armor is certainly not enough to make up the 8 mana expenditure here on Norgannon. But presumably, through this hero power, you're going to be able to start regaining a lot of that disadvantage by wiping your opponent's boards super efficiently with spell damage clears. Particularly very cheap ones. Suddenly Arcane Explosion with a few extra spell damage is amazing. Or alternatively, you could just set up to go face, start slamming fireballs and pyroblasts based on all this extra spell damage that you've accrued. And you know what? Even frostbolts now are absolutely bonkers. So it gives you a couple different ways to utilize this as an end game win condition. And it's another one of those cards that really puts a clock on your opponent. It's like, man, I can't let him keep contemplating. This dude's been contemplating all day. He's up to 7 spell damage. This is never going to work. I can't win this game. So I think that's a really cool aspect as well. Big sacrifice now for a super powerful late long-term advantage through the hero power. That's cool design. I like that risk-reward balance. And although it might seem oppressive if you just focus on the hero power aspect, please don't forget the downside and the time it takes to spin this up to make it powerful that would often lose you games. So really neat take on Norgannon here is, again, the keeper of all magics and stuff. It's pretty sweet and fun little design here for Mage. Moving on to A&R Lifebinder from Beastie Hedgehog. She's a 9-mana hero card for Druid, and she's got 5 armor, and she restores your hero to full health. So big time life gain on A&R, which is really the perfect option for her. A lot of people played with the same mechanic, her restoring minions to full health, heroes to full health, but I thought this one best captured the different balance between all these mechanics. And so Ultimate Reno at 9 mana, like, yes, that's very powerful. It's debatably too good compared to things like Nozari or Tree of Life, which were symmetrical effects. And this is only a unidirectional effect, but let's get real. Those other cards, it doesn't really usually matter that they're symmetrical. If you're playing a deck that wants to heal to full, you're usually playing from behind and don't care a ton about your opponent's health total anyway. Few exclusions apply, but ultimately, those all kind of feel like one-directional effects as well. And then, of course, we've got Reno too, right? He does all this for 6 mana back in the day with some deck restrictions withstanding that A&R does not have to adhere to. But nonetheless, she costs 3 mana more and doesn't summon a minion. So I don't actually think this is OP at all. I think it's totally fine. And their hero power here is Dream Beam. I love the rhyme. It's 2 mana, and it deals 1 damage to a minion if that minion dies. So a la Mortal Coil, this will add a random dream card to your hand. The dream cards are the cards we know from the original Ysera. So a great way to generate some powerful cards if you can line up this hero power. So this is also a bit reminiscent of things like the old Frostlich Jaina, kill a minion, do a thing, but it's a powerful card in hand as opposed to a minion on board. And in particular, a lot of those cards can result in lots of face damage thanks to things like Ysera Awakens. Even Nightmare can also push some damage too. But with Ysera Awakens, it's nice that you healed the full because you might be chipping your health back down via some of these dream cards. You can also just get some big minions or a really cheap sap/bounce style effect. So all in all, big upside on this hero power, but it does require a little bit of manipulation to get health totals into the right spot, which I don't think Druid's quite as good at as Mage. So maybe a little bit harder to utilize than Jaina, and I would argue similar upsides as well. But nonetheless, fantastic battle cry. Really cool, connected, flavorful hero power as well that feels pretty balanced in line with other things we've seen in the past. So really tight design on this one from Beastie Hedgehog, and just a great way to capture the character. All right, guess what? It's Norgannon again. He was very popular, and this one's from Gorda the Great. 7 mana, still Mage. Battlecry, shuffle 10 Planar Portals into your deck. A Planar Portal is a 5 mana card. It casts when drawn, and it summons a random Mage minion. So he's using all these portals to bring mage minions into play. And then he's also got a passive hero power. Whenever a minion is played, freeze it. Now, keep in mind that's any minion. It's not just enemy minions, it's allied minions as well. So basically everything is kind of on an extra turn delay. It is a symmetrical effect, so it seems pretty crazy powerful at first glance, but you're suffering from it as well. But, of course, that's where the battle cry comes into play. You're summoning minions that aren't played. They're summoned. They are not frozen when they're summoned. So you gain a little bit of advantage through Norgannon's portals. Also, you just get a bunch of minions, much like, say, Ysera Unleashed. Now, mage minions, I think, on average, are much worse than random dragons from Ysera. They just tend to be lower cost, have really situational style effects. So, and a lot of battle cry stuff in general as well. So, I think this is notably worse than Ysera Unleashed from the portal standpoint, despite having more portals. But then it gains a little upside off the dampening field as well. Beyond that, I think mage gains a small advantage from dampening field, because if mage is utilizing either freeze synergy stuff, think like Ray of Frost that deals damage to frozen cards, or alternatively just lots of board clears, it helps to stall out your opponent's minions, because you can kind of build more of them into a single board before unleashing that Flame Strike or Blizzard or whatever it might be to help fully resolve those. Also, of course, if you're just playing a control style, you like when the game slows down a little bit, and this would really help you to achieve that. But just be careful that your own minions don't need to attack to help you end the game, or you could suffer some consequences as well. So despite being a fairly symmetrical looking hero power, I think it still greatly benefits the player here of Norgannon. And of course, the portals are pretty cool too. So, I don't know if this would be good for the game. I kind of hate the freeze mechanic in a lot of ways, to be honest. I've almost wished freeze wasn't in the game. It's strategically rewarding, but so frustrating to play sometimes, and to play against, of course, because it just feels like you're not really playing Hearthstone. It's kind of changed the rules a little bit, and you're just stuck, unable to do anything, which doesn't give you a lot of agency, and often has those feel bad moments. So, if it were up to me personally, I would kind of vote to never have a card like this in Hearthstone, but not everybody agrees with that, right? Some people like freeze mechanics, some people like this style of play, so I'm respecting that. I'm respecting that I think this is a cool design that connects a lot of those elements together. So this card's not for me, but I think it still does a lot of things really well, and that's why I think it deserves inclusion here in this video. All right, next up is another Golganeth, this time from Yum Yum Puddin'. It's an 8-mana Shaman hero card. Battlecry, summon a Storm Elemental with stats equal to the number of mana crystals you overloaded this game. I love this. I love cards that just make giant things and do big crazy stuff, and certainly Golganeth could do that. If you overload 30 mana crystals over the course of the game, you play Golganeth, he's going to summon you a 30/30 Storm Elemental, and I think that's so cool. Now, a Storm Elemental was not included, so we're assuming here it has just no effect, no taunt, or anything like that. It's just a pile of stats. So one gigantic minion. You've also got this hero power here, which is pretty crazy, the Titanic Surge. It deals 2 damage, but then it deals an additional +1 damage for every overloaded mana crystal that you have. So if you overloaded 3 last time, this would deal 2 damage by default, and then deal an additional 3, so it would be a 5 damage ping, which, needless to say, that's amazing. That's like a Metamorphosis ping anytime you overload. So this becomes this crazy strong overload synergy card, both with the kind of instant dump of stats, but also I think even more so, this hero power is really, really good long term. So a couple things. I would have made this hero power 2 mana. I mean, I know 1 mana hero power is the thing now with Demon Hunter, but this feels really, really strong. Because, a 5 damage ping is just something that can go face super hard and start ending games. And although Overload is punishing in a way because you're limited on how much you can do in a given turn, that's often already built into the cards at least a little. They're overstated. They're doing something extra already. So having too much benefit for Overload, that's a fine line you have to walk. So I would move that to 2. I might even move it to like 1 damage by default, because I think right now it's probably too good. Now that said though, I think Golganeth is actually fairly weak. Summoning a 30/30 is cool, but everybody has Zephyrus or just a natural Shadow Word Death or whatever it is, right? A Rotnest Drake, something that's going to just clear the stats immediately. So without it having Rush or Taunt or something that maybe forces the game to play through it, the Battlecry on Golganeth itself is pretty weak. So it is important that the hero power is good. You kind of just have to decide where you land on those balance aspects. And of course, sometimes that 30/30 sticks and ends the game. Other times it gets ignored and Demon Hunter hits you in the face for a billion and you're dead. But I'm curious what you guys think. How would you tweak this card to make the numbers exactly right in your mind? Because keep in mind, Titanic Surge is overloading itself. So what that means is every turn is going to deal at least 3 damage. and potentially way more if your deck is structured correctly, which it certainly would be if you're running this card. So really cool ideas here. I love the theory behind each of these. I would certainly tweak the numbers to make this feel more realistic in my mind, but nonetheless, a great take on the character, and I love the big bomb overload minion. I think that's really, really cool. All right, so finally here, it's Argus Unmaker from Synth and Lasers, a 10-mana Warlock hero card with a battle cry that discards your hand. You're getting rid of every card. And also, your spells cast when drawn. So for the rest of the game, all your spells are going to cast when you draw them. So you're giving up a lot right now, but you're potentially gaining a lot of upside from having spells that automatically cycle into new cards and go off for free. So Warlock does have a lot of spells where that's not necessarily inherently good. Most of their, say, like minion affecting spells, Mortal Coils, Siphon Souls, Shadow Bolts, can hit a minion, not an enemy minion. So sometimes you might inadvertently hit your own stuff. But there's other things like Hand of Gul'dan or Twisted Knowledge that just draw you more cards or just generate you resources, and playing those for free and when you draw them is just amazing, right? So you would construct your deck in a way to properly utilize this cast when drawn effect. And you've also got a hero power, End It All, that draws you a card. So you're still drawing into spells that are going off immediately. You don't lose the ability to draw. And if you draw a demon minion, you're going to give it +4/+4, and it's going to cost 0. So basically you want a deck that's kind of a nice mix of demons and a nice mix of spells that perhaps interact well with those demons, which is kind of tough for Warlock, but you could imagine that existing in the future. You also have some of the universal spells, not universal, but spells that are conditional, like Demon Fire, and I think the old one was like Demon Heart. What was the name of that old card? I'm looking it up right now. The 5-mana 5/5 that did the same thing, where if it targets an enemy minion, it deals damage, but if it targets a friendly minion, it utilizes a buff. That was called Demon Heart. I was right. Boom. So those could be great fits for something like this, where it's like, hey, if I hit my own stuff accidentally, boom. If I hit the opponent's stuff accidentally, that's totally fine too. So a couple different ways to play this successfully. You could also just go like hyper defensive and run only Twisting Nethers and all the stuff that you play for free, and maybe occasional card generation resources and such, and just try to bleed out your opponent or play towards Mbekathun late in the game or that sort of thing, right? So all in all, I don't know exactly how you'd use a card like this, but it's got a really big effect. It fits Warlock really nicely, I think. Not to mention, discard synergies that are exploited via this battle cry. In Wild, we know that would be nuts as is. In Standard right now, maybe not quite as good, but again, Hand of Gul'dan's and all these things play nicely into it. So you can make maybe a really big swing turn off the discards. You could play for this crazy cast when drawn, long-term mana efficiency, or you could just play for really big demons as you draw them as well. It kind of gives you 3 different ways to play, and I think that's awesome and cool and perfect for these sorts of cards, particularly Titans that are giant, super impactful sorts of characters. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for Titan hero cards. For this video, I really tried to focus on things that had kind of big, crazy effects. Maybe not always like competitively sensible or viable, but just game-changing, enormous, impending doom to capture that scale and feel of Titans and just how big and powerful they really are. So hopefully that came across well, but as always, share your thoughts on these cards or share cards you thought you submitted that were better than these. I'm sure other folks would like to take a look. That said, if you're curious what we're going to do for next time, I want you to design for me a dual class card. We saw dual class cards teased in the Skullman's Academy reveal. We saw a couple. They also named the list of actual dual classes, but I'm not going to behold you to that. If you have 2 classes you think could make a really cool card together, whether they're the ones that are officially going to be in the game or not, make that dual class card. If you're unable to Photoshop it together successfully, don't worry, just submit a version of it in one class and a version in the other class, and I'll fuse the 2 together myself in Photoshop for the video. So if it's Warlock and Paladin, stick a Warlock and Paladin card together. Now everybody's going to go make Lothraxian for that exact idea. So I look forward to seeing those. But that said, there are always more details in the description below. So check that link. In the meantime, share your thoughts on these cards. Thanks so very much for watching. And until next time, game on.